All right, welcome back to the Tectonic Takes podcast. Normally, we're going to recap a game for you, but I think calling the last game a game is overselling it. It was more of a self-destruction. But anyway, I'm your host, Ivan, here with Abram. Abram, how are we feeling now?
I'm tired. I'm not just tired of being a fan of this team, but also I drove a lot today, as always, and it was very hot. It's a very hot day today.
Yeah,
It's not going well.
yeah. Not going well whatsoever. Well, the Heat has its pros and cons. There was no pros, only cons to that performance, albeit for the goal that Hernan Lopez set up for Pellegrino. That was it. That was the only good part of that performance. And we did ask before we started recording some questions or thoughts from our friends over at the Tectonic Takes Discord. And as we expected, there was a lot of pessimistic, loss of hope, and we agree with that. Honestly, it's really tough right now. We even have people wanting to come on and rant and join us, which we'll have some opportunities for that coming up.
Yeah, no, definitely. We want to. We've been talking about doing more live stuff. I haven't been able to afford card streams. That's a very
Mm-hmm.
expensive undertaking because cards cost money, and we don't make
Yeah,
any money from this podcast. But I've been driving a lot, I've been working a lot, so maybe that'll change, and then we have other stuff in the works as well. So
gotcha. Yep. So Palmery aficionado also asked simply just why, and we could just leave the podcast on that, but that would be a waste of your time for clicking onto this video. Bitcoin asks, what changes do we need to make to improve the results? And that's the thing. Like, there's no clear solution. Like, the roster has been improved in terms of personnel, in terms of talent, it feels like, and yet some reason we just can't win games right now. I don't know if the change is obviously it has to be tactical, but what that tactical change is, I'm not sure. I'm not necessarily putting our hopes out. Oh yeah, we just need to get Daniel back from injury, because that's not the problem either. Like, uh, what are there any changes that stand out to you? Because I'm drawing a blank with that
I
one.
mean, so the issue is that there's no issues that we can change right now. So every
Yeah.
issue that this club has is deep rooted, and that stems from the
Mm-hmm.
ownership. And what are we going to do about that? There is no button to fire
Yeah.
Fisher. He's the guy with the control panel. So it's not gonna be that easy. It's always been this hard as a Quakes fan. We always
Yeah.
forget every year. We're like, oh, maybe we can like win a game. No, what do you think? We're Quakes fans. So that's the issue. I mean, there's a lot of things that we could do better. There's a lot of changes that we could make, and this team would improve as a result. But we can't do those things. We don't like spending money. We don't. We're not ambitious as a club, and these things have been changing slowly over time. And I think Chris Leach has been a huge proponent of that. But he only has so much power, and he has a leash. Leach has a leash on him, and he's not allowed to
Mhm.
just go and do whatever he wants. He does have very strict parameters that he has to work between, and that doesn't really lend to having a successful franchise, unfortunately. And we're just
Yeah.
stuck as fans of that restricted franchise. So strap in.
Right. And right now I'm in the camp that I don't think Lucci has to go yet. If I were making that decision, I'm not firing Lucci Gonzalez. I think everyone needs to take a little bit of the blame, and may need to be a season of just figuring it out. Uh, that might be the best case scenario at this point, because when you lose 5-1 and you're at the foot of the table, you're in the win spoon change, there's really no delusions of, okay, we can get playoffs. Now, that doesn't become a consideration again unless slash if they get at least to 10th. That would be the requirement for me. But if Lucci is no longer the Quakes manager at some point, what would be the next best option? For me, the one guy that would come to mind is no longer available. Jesse Marsh, he's now the Canadian national team manager. I wouldn't mind seeing him play. Be the coach for the San Jose Earthquakes because I feel like he really does, get the most out of players from like a physical standpoint, pressing, and I feel like that could be, something that could work in MLS. But even then, I think that would be, a risk. But I don't know. Is there a manager that you'd like to see, or is that something you even want to speculate?
I mean, it's really tough, because you can't predict what a manager is going to do for your club. Like Jesse Marsh is basically born and bred Red Bull soccer type of guy. Like energy drink soccer is what you think of when you think Jesse Marsh, and he kind of needs the team to be built that way. And he would be working under a team that doesn't want to build a team. Um, so it would be really tough for a guy like that to take what we have now and make it better.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
I can't say that I watched a lot of Leeds or New York Red Bull or any Red Bull team in particular. So that's just my uneducated opinion on that. But in terms of like picking out a manager that I think that is reasonable to come to the Quakes. A lot of people have talked about or speculated about Ian Russell. I don't know.
Hmm.
Like maybe, maybe he'd be really good, but there's nothing that he's done that has moved me in a way that I'm like, oh yeah, we need that guy. Like
Yeah.
it's all circumstantial. Like we like him because he's been part of the club for a minute, but we can't really pretend that he has more qualifications than that. Like it's not really he hasn't done anything explosive or exceptional in my opinion. And you also have to consider like if we're going outside and grabbing an outsider, who's gonna want to come because
Yeah.
Lucci was not he's not like a huge deal when we got him, but he was like working in with the World Cup team. You know what I mean? So that it's not a great look. And we also had Matias Almeida before him, who like it's really we haven't done well with high profile managers either, and so
Hmm.
you know other coaches are going to see like, oh, Matias didn't like it there, Lucci had a really tough time there, what am I gonna do? And I don't know. So it's and also we'd be overpaying to bring anyone in like we do with players, anyways. So it's a really rough situation. And honestly, I don't really know. I don't have anyone in mind, and that's kind of why I'm
Yeah.
not really ready to say Lucci out yet because I don't know who would come in. You have to replace your manager if you fire your manager. And I don't know if we have the capability to bring in a replacement that would necessarily be worth it to do so.
Yeah. I think what's keeping Lucci in a good spot is that the transfers that are coming in are working. Like, at least individually, of course, the team wide results, and that's the most important thing, are crap. But Hernan Lopez, for example, you can't just pull the plug on Lucci Gonzalez a few months into, okay, Hernan Lopez, because the team is completely different with Hernan Lopez now. And that's going to take time as well, and yet he's jumped right in. That's the frustrating part. He's been so good. He hasn't had a bad game yet, and yet that hasn't resulted in great results as a team. So that brings me into the lineups for this game. So Yarbrough net, we got Beeson, Rodriguez, Wilson, and Marie, and the biggest issue there was both Acapo and uh, Vitor were suspended due to yellow card accumulations. Good news is they'll be back for Cincinnati. Jackson Ewell and Nico Shakiris in midfield, Espinoza on the right, Pellegrino on the left, Hernan Lopez up top, and Jeremy Abobasi as the striker. And then for New York City, you had Friesen goal, Gray, Martins, Risa, and O'Toole was their starting back line. O'Toole had to come off injury around the 39th minute, and that's where Ilenic came in for him. James Sands and Keaton Parks, their midfield duo. Fernandez on the right, Hans Wolf, who had the first goal on the left, and then Santiago Rodriguez in the attacking midfield, and then Jovan Mijatovic was their starting striker, but the guy who stole the show coming off the bench, Alonso Martinez, he had a hat trick within essentially 10 minutes. And that is a special kind of failure when you get a player that comes into the game and they have a not just a hat trick off the bench, a hat trick within 10 minutes. And it's a self destruction, and it's inexcusable for me because they didn't play midweek. Of course, that would be cruel and unusual to put, Quakes Wednesday and then Friday. That's never going to happen. But there is no excuse. It's not like if this is a Saturday coming off a Wednesday game, then maybe there would be some reasoning that still would be inexcusable. But the fact that they had almost a full week's rest and they just kind of like fell asleep at the wheel, and even the first goal they conceded to Hans Wolf, it was because they did very poor decision making playing off the back. So it's whether it's fatigue, whether it's making poor decisions, whether it's just all the problems the defense have had all season long, it's just ridiculous. And it's like we can't have both. We can't have a good attack and a good defense. We can't have both apparently, and it just flips around randomly. We can't really decide from season to season apparently with this club.
You know how like there's the stereotype in a Latino household that if you're the kid and you ask your parents if you can go outside, you can't have fun 2 days in a row. That's kind of what it's like
Mm-hmm.
to have Fisher as a manager. You can't have two parts of the team that are good at the same time. Like it's impossible. So, and the thing is about this game, I don't know what your perspective was on this match, but it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
a 5-1 game. Like,
It
you know
wasn't.
what I mean? Like it was like at the very end because
Mm-hmm.
most teams don't score five in 15 minutes. Like that's not in the realm of normality. That was abnormal what happened, and we played a normal match, a 1-1 game for 79 minutes, and then we melted down, and trying to come back from that meltdown caused it to continue, and it was. I think the meltdown was kind of tactical, but also we didn't have a lot of our starters. Like you mentioned that it's not like we were fatigued, but we didn't have our starting right back. We didn't have our starting left back, and
And Wilson came off in the 35th minute.
yeah,
Muni came in to replace him.
so that's three of your starting defenders gone.
Mm-hmm.
And Murray,
Yep.
I didn't think was terrible, but he did, kind of mess up on the first goal. Beeson, I thought had the worst game in an Earthquakes jersey, unfortunately.
And that's saying something because he's had a few stinkers.
Yeah, and I personally I think Beeson has been like a scapegoat, similar to Jackson Newell this season, but he also has not been, doing himself any favors with performances like these. His performance against Sacramento also wasn't that great. So, like
Mm-hmm.
when that kind of performance is happening consistently from you, then you're not going to change anyone's minds. So it's really
Yeah.
unfortunate. And then, like, yeah, he's like I know that he played left back in college, but we see Beeson, right? We know what he can and can't do. He's not even fast for a center back. He's not going to be fast enough to be a fullback, and
Yeah.
he doesn't have the offensive prowess to really cover that side at all. Like if you're trying to build up from the left, you're not going to because Beeson doesn't build up well as a fullback, and also Pellegrino, that's not really his strength, right? He gets built up too. He's the end product. He's not the guy who's gonna bring the ball up the field. So that our whole left side was a dud. And what are you gonna do?
Right. Ewell had the worst match rating out of all the outfield players. Of course, Yarborough had to take the brunt of it because he conceded 5 goals as a
Yeah.
goalkeeper. So that's going to tor- torch his rating there. What's kind of a concern for me is that Carlos Gruezo didn't get into the game at all. So we'll see what that was about there. The only subs that were not injury related were Skane and Judd, which I understand those substitutions. And then Morales didn't play at all against his former club. we're not in no position to be sentimental, but it's not like it would have been a stretch. It's not like this would have been the first time he's played all season. And then, at the very least, it would have been nice to okay, let's bring in Cruz Medina for like 5 minutes. So all three of those substitutions were three different windows, and he lost a window because the Muni substitution came in at the 35th minute. So I'm sure that impacted the subs a little bit. So I'm not going to be quite as harsh, but it's like you said, like we're starting to just barely begin this relationship with our depth, thinking like, okay, we can rely on these guys for a game or two in a row, but this is a game that takes it a step back for everybody, for the bench, obviously for the players that played the majority of the game, because they're the ones that have this 5-1 scoreline, even if it's not a 5-1 game, stamped to, their season so far. And it's a really brutal way to end what was a mixed bag of a month that was really split down the middle.
Yeah, no, like it at worst that was a 2-1 game. Like
Uh-huh.
let's be clear. New York City played their butt off in the last 10 like 15 minutes. But that came out of like nowhere and we kind of allowed that to happen. So it was a mix of us being bad and them being good. But no, that was a 1-1 game, 2-1 game at worst. And then we really let it slip. You were saying about the depth and the substitutions. Yeah, Lucci was about to make different substitutions, but when the goal went in, that kind of like everyone had a
That
chance to
too.
get punched in the face. So that totally ruined Lucci's plans at that point of the game. And also, you mentioned about what's his name, Morales. He's
Yes.
had an injury for a few weeks now. I don't know if that's been like listed anywhere, but I just listened
Yeah.
to the Ted Remy podcast, and I didn't get a chance to listen in on the post game press conference. But Lucci did mention that that was the reason that Morales couldn't see the field on that day. But still, I mean, it doesn't matter who you had out there. We had our starters. Um, we
Yeah.
had a lot of starters, and I know we said that like Wilson went out, and that was a huge, probably the biggest impact on the match, in my opinion. But still, it is so bad. It was really, really bad.
Yeah. And if we look at just this month of May, if our March and April was like this month of May, then the Quakes would at least have somewhat of a salvageable season. But the fact of the matter is, we're trending in the wrong direction once again, and we topped out at 2 league wins in 1 month. That just can't happen in Major League Soccer. That just can't happen in any league. We have 4 wins all season, and one of those wins was separated by 5 winless games. And similarly, with that 1-1 draw against Nashville, that was a draw following a losing streak. And that's not really a confidence builder. It's like you didn't lose, but you didn't win either. So in total, when you add this all up, we have 4 wins, 2 draws, 12 losses so far. And it's hard to see get much better. Do you have any thoughts as you look at these results here, Abram?
It's a lot of red.
Yeah, a lot of red. It's been bad.
Yeah, I mean, so when I come home from a game and I'm like, my girlfriend asked me what the score was, and I say we lost. I have to say we lost most of the time. Then I'm like, we tied. She's like, oh, okay, that's not a loss. But unfortunately, because of the context of all these other losses, everything
Mhm.
that's not a win, everything that's not maximum points from here is a loss. So it doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so uh, that's a really bad position to be in. Sorry.
You can't draw your way up the table.
Yeah, and we can't do that if we're going to be drawing. Like we need wins. We need more than an average of 1 point to get to playoffs. So you can't do that if you're not getting over a point a game.
Yeah. Our next month, after this international break, we start with Cincinnati, and that'll be the Pride Games. So that'll be a great event for many reasons, but it'll be a fun game, hopefully, too. Then they have a midweek game hosting Portland, and then we go to LA for LAFC. Then it's the Stanford games, Saturday, June 29th. That's going to be circling a lot of calendars. And if the trend continues, that Stanford game will probably be the last game a lot of Quakes fans go to this season. It usually is, even in a good season. And then lastly, I threw in July 3rd in there because it's a midweek game. St. Louis City is on the road. That's going to be very tough because they have one of the biggest crowds in Major League Soccer. Really tough place to play away. I know maybe it's kind of an overreaction from the 5-1 loss, and again, it's felt like a 2-1, but it is a 5-1 based on the scoreline. But I'm thinking we could easily get just 2 points out of a potential 15. When I look at those 5 games, there's not an easy game, and frankly, there's no such thing as an easy game when you're the one at the bottom of the table. You're the easy game for other people.
Yeah, and it's been that way for too long. I think that
Yeah.
we've improved a lot, and I keep saying that, but it's true, right? Like this team is better
Yeah.
than we've been, and there's no way around that. But there's also no way to really like that doesn't mean anything, Like we can improve as a team in terms of personnel and underlying numbers, but none of that matters if the scoreline doesn't represent it. And it has been an anomalous season in terms of how bad we've been with how good we are.
Yeah. It's been tough to watch. Even this game, 59% New York City possession, and the XG fit the 5-1 kind of a fake scoreline narrative. 2.73 for New York. Well, still 3-1 then, if you want to go with that. Whereas we got the one expected goal. And they outshot us 20-11, and on target. I think they scored with every shot on target. Yeah, so no, they had 10 shots on target. So that's still one goal for every 2 shots on target.
Isn't it crazy
So
that we at one
yeah,
point, if Nico had scored that goal, we would have been 2-1 up. Like you wouldn't think
yeah,
that, before the 80th minute we could have been winning this game. Uh, but alas, we are the Quakes.
yeah. The passing stat is very alarming. They had 550 passes to our 390, and the most alarming part for that is when you get outpassed by 100 or more. If they still have a higher passing accuracy, that is a big sign of shoddy play.
Yeah, I mean, we said we weren't going to talk too much about this game because there's
Yeah.
not much to say. That we were outplayed, and not just we weren't doing amazingly before the 4 goals came out of nowhere. It wasn't like we were showering ourselves in glory. It was just it went from bad to much 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 worse.
Yeah, it's just been tough. It's going to be a tough season from here on out. Just a quick update on the MLS table because we are in international break, so we'll get a chance to marinate on this a little bit. We'll start with the East. Inter Miami up top with a 2-point lead over Cincinnati. And then rounding out the top 4 is the New York City and New York Red Bulls duo. In 5 through 7, we've got Charlotte, Toronto, Columbus. And then 8 and 9, Philadelphia and Nashville. DC United is in 10th behind Nashville on goal difference. And then Orlando, Montreal, Atlanta, and Chicago, they're still kind of in the mix. The only team that's in the San Jose Earthquakes tier at this point on the Eastern Conference is New England Revolution. Inter Miami are a bit mortal. They were able to be beaten by Atlanta United. That was a really good game. And it's going to be interesting to see how Lionel Messi returns to Inter Miami with all their commitments they have with the Leagues Cup and, of course, their playoff push because Messi looked a bit tired at points during the Leagues Cup last year. But it's going to be exciting to see what Messi does with Argentina. It could be his last Copa America as well as Angel Di Maria. Are you looking forward to that?
Yeah, I mean, we always love to watch Messi, but he hasn't been surrounded by the most intense quality or competitive teammates. Obviously, he does have Busquets, Alba, all those guys, but they're also in the same situation where they're also slowing down. So I think this is the first time in a while where we're going to be like, okay, maybe Messi isn't that player, but also he could prove us wrong because he has that kind of magic in him. Um, so I don't really know what to expect, but it'll be fun to see either way.
Do you know who the top Western Conference team is off the top of your head? If not, would you like to guess?
Top Western Conference. Um, I don't know. Um,
Why don't you give it a guess?
so I don't know anyone who's been doing overly great. I know that St. Louis isn't the same team. I,
St. Louis is not even in a playoff spot right now.
yeah, like they were, they ran away with it last year, but this year has been
Mm-hmm.
big different. Um, LAFC maybe, I don't know.
LAFC is second. RSL, Real
Oh,
Salt
that's
Lake,
right.
is first.
No, Chicho is
Yeah.
having an amazing year. Usually, I'm watching or listening to the Extra Time podcast and keeping up with MLS, but I just can't. It's been really rough. So it's been, yeah, but yeah.
And Real Salt Lake, what's been most impressive with me is that they're bringing in a lot of these young players and developing them very well, and they're performing very well. Diego Luna was a big story last year and will be this year, of course, and then Fidel Barajas as well. That's going to be cool to see how he continues on his career. And then Minnesota United and LA Galaxy round out the top four for the projected home playoff games. 5 through 7 is Vancouver Whitecaps, Austin FC, and Houston Dynamo. And then the last two play-in spots for the playoffs are Colorado and Portland Timbers. Seattle Sounders just 2 points below their Cascadia rivals. Then St. Louis City in 17th. And this is where, at least in the bottom of the conference, I kind of feel like the Eastern Conference is slightly stronger, like pound for pound, although maybe the best teams in the Western Conference versus the Eastern Conference, that could be a different story. But Dallas and Sporting Kansas City are joining the San Jose Earthquakes in not really having fun this season. And it's really interesting to see. So the four worst teams in MLS in 2024 are some of the original teams: New England Revolution, FC Dallas, Sporting Kansas City, and San Jose Earthquakes. So whether there's not too much that really binds the four together other than that status. So that's just something I thought would be interesting to point out. And lastly, I thought it'd be fun to just take a look at the international call-ups across Major League Soccer. Of course, we'll stop and talk a little bit about some of the key players that appear on Euro or Copa America nations. And our tentative plan right now is, at the very least, it'll be Abram and myself next Wednesday to do a Euro 2024 preview and predictions. And that will begin some of our tournament coverage, especially during these periods where it's an international break. Of course, that'll resume, and there will be earthquakes fixtures thick and fast. So we'll probably integrate some of that coverage into the end of our episodes during that time. But let's go ahead and look at the June 2024 MLS call-ups. So we've got Argentina for Thiago Almada. He's with the U23s, which is interesting.
It's me.
And then, yeah, Luis Abram. Yep. He's going to be on the Peru roster, and Bartosz Schlitz for Poland. Then we got Julio Cascante on Costa Rica's roster for Austin. Zerdan Shaqiri is going to be a key player, as always, for Switzerland. And I think that's a very frustrating aspect for a lot of Chicago Fire fans, Abram, because Shaqiri for the Chicago Fire has been not so great. But for Switzerland, he always puts in a shift. But I think that's been what his career has been like as a whole. Some players are just better at international level than at club level. Your thoughts on Shaqiri?
When I was a kid, I used to think that Giovanni Dos Santos didn't play for a club team. I thought he was only a national team player. At the time, he was playing at Sporting in Spain, Mallorca. So like I was kind of right, but he just wasn't performing really. So but that's kind of what it's like for Shakiri.
And for Ochoa, like for a lot of his peak years, he was playing at Ajaccio, which was like a relegation battling team in Ligue 1 in France.
I don't know why he does that. He had opportunities to go other places, and I like they yeah. At some points he was considered one of the best keepers in the world because of his World Cup performances. So that was really, in my opinion, on his agents and him more than anything else. But no, Shaqiri, I think that he's been a failed experiment for Chicago,
Mhm.
and they'll want to move on from him because he's probably taking up a big chunk of their wages. So yeah, I mean, it's disappointing to see that their franchise is not doing well. It kind of I feel sympathy for them because we are in a similar place where we're not good. Um,
Mhm.
but
Yeah, it even didn't even go as well as with Bastian Schweinsteiger there. Um, Going down the list here, Moise Bombito representing Canada for Colorado. Then we got Coco Carrasquilla, one of Houston Dynamo's best players. He'll, of course, be one of Panama's best players at the Copa America. Olivier Giroud will be playing in the Euro, and I guess this counts as an LAFC player, although he most recently plays club football for AC Milan. We've discussed this before, especially when we talked about the LAFC game back in May 4th with Casey, but I'm scared for how LAFC is going to look when we play against them when they have Giroud. But I think he's not going to join until July, so that's going to be delayed just a little bit more.
yeah, no, I think he really fits their team, unfortunately. So it might be really dangerous.
Yeah, of course, we mentioned Messi, Matias Rojas as well for Paraguay, notable there. Uh, Minnesota sending a few Canadians to Copa America, as well as Montreal, of course, plus Ariel Lassiter. Okay, so maybe MLS still needs to proofread their stuff because there's no way Walker Zimmerman is with the U23s. Come on now. And then,
Right.
of course, Jacob Schaffelberg, another Canadian. But also Henrik Ravas. So New England Revolution's conveyor belt of goalkeepers. That's the one thing that's still working with them. Now he's in the Slovakia squad for the Euro tournament. And I believe Serbia, Georgi Pekovic, the former New England Revolution player who had an okay season for Chelsea, he did well enough to get in Serbia's squad as well. So good for
Ivan,
you, New England.
I have a
Yeah.
question because I actually don't know. So if they were going to the Olympics, let's say, uh,
Yeah. Huh.
would the Olympics show up as U23? One second.
Oh, you're right. So maybe that wasn't a mistake. Maybe Zimmerman is going to the Olympics. You're right. Yeah, that's probably why. And that might be why Almada is showing up as U23 for Argentina. So the aforementioned Tavon Gray, he had a good game against us for New York City. He'll be in Jamaica's roster without Leon Bailey. That was a big story. Leon Bailey has had a rocky relationship with the Jamaica FA, and we'll see how they do without him. And then a few Uruguay players coming in from Orlando. Facundo Torres. Yeah, Orlando themselves are struggling a bit. They're currently 11th in the Eastern Conference, but Facundo Torres is one of the best players in the league. So it's good to see him continue to get recognized.
Yeah, no, he's a very fun player to watch. Not a very fun player to watch against you. He was playing against us recently, and
Mhm.
he was just one of those guys where you knew that if you give him enough time, he's going to make something happen. So, yeah,
Yeah, and then Andres Cubas for Vancouver Whitecaps, Toronto FC, a few key players. Sean Johnson having a bit of a resurgent year. And he's back on the USA radar. And then, of course, San Jose Earthquakes with 7 internationals. It's great to see our youth players, particularly. We haven't seen too much of Cruz Medina as much as we would hope yet at the senior level. It was great to see him on the bench, in this matchup. But USA U19 for him, along with Shakiris, is exciting. And then Emil Ochoa from Mexico U20. So our young players, are getting these great opportunities, and it's great to see, right, Abram?
Yeah, that was something that I was made aware of today. That Ochoa would be joining the U20 Mexico team. I think that we all saw it along with the
Hmm.
Big's tweet earlier today. So yeah, that's great news because Ochoa is the guy who has been kind of forgotten. You know, he was getting called up consistently for the national team, but we weren't seeing or hearing much from him other than he was going to be covering our bench, and being our number two. So it's good to hear that he's still in contention. People are still watching him because he's definitely a very talented keeper who has earned this lot, in my opinion.
Yep. And we wish the best for our senior national team players, Carlos Guezo for Ecuador, Useni Buda for Burkina Faso, Michael Baldissimo for Philippines, and Carlos Acapa for Equatorial Guinea. I believe Equatorial Guinea unfortunately lost to Tunisia, but Tunisia are a strong African team, so it's not the worst result. And most importantly, come back healthy. Do not get injured on international duty, please, especially Acapa, because we need you back. So overall, I think we put the loss in New York City in perspective. But what is any lesson that needs to be hammered home in the preparation for Cincinnati? Because we know Cincinnati are a full force attacking team. They got a lot of talented players in their midfield, and Wobodo and Acosta, and in their attack with Bupendra. uh, it's going to be really tricky. I don't foresee a clean sheet, but what do you think the Quakes can do to maybe be stronger defensively? Because as has been a recurring theme on this podcast and in any space that's talking about the earthquakes, we know we're going to score goals. We can score enough goals with just a little bit more defense to get a bit more results than we have been. But what's something you'd like to see more from the Quakes as a whole or from the defense?
I don't know. Like Wilson is not gonna be here. I don't know if he's gonna be
Yeah.
ready or not. But whoever is there, and it's probably Beeson, needs to step up and say screw whatever the media is saying, screw whatever the fans are saying. You know, I know what I could do. I'm gonna show everyone, and that's what we need right now because we don't have
Yeah.
anyone who is like stepping up to that plate. Jabo is the only player who I think
Hmm.
has that kind of attitude within him to be like, no, screw this, screw whatever the lineup is. I am the man, and I'm gonna score when I'm needed. Right now, Beeson is needed, and as unfortunate that might be because he hasn't been playing to his standard, uh, we need him. And Daniel Mooney is right behind him, waiting to take that spot as a third center back. But he's a young
Hmm.
guy. He's 21, 22, maybe 23. I'm not actually sure, but he's still inexperienced. It's only his second year as a professional player. We need guys to step up, and it's a mentality thing. I don't like to comment on players' mentalities, but it's actually a big deficit that we're having right now, where not enough people are really solidifying their mindset and saying I'm not going to get scored on, I'm not going to lose. And it's very frustrating as a fan who I'm there every game. It's not an easy drive. A lot of people have it much harder than me. When we go out to the stadium week in, week out, we pay for Apple TV for what? You know,
For me, I want to see less mistakes in the 18-yard box in the final third. I want to see them play a complete game, and they need to recover from the self destruction. And what I mean by that is like if we can go like the last 15 minutes plus stoppage without conceding a goal, even if we've already conceded two before that, but you prevent it from it being a 2-0 or a 2-1 loss to 3-1 or a 3-0. That can be something that can be valuable, but it's not an easy process to put together a whole 90 minutes to learn how to win when it's just been this bad and it's been this difficult for
I
so
also want to
long.
say that
So,
you were saying that we need to be better in the final 18, or outside of our own 18, but like it's been actually a problem. We are a
yeah.
great offense. We've been scoring goals with the best of them this year.
Hmm.
Sorry about the background noise, but I'm going to talk through it. Um, we haven't been clinical. We've made chances. We make chances, but we don't score enough. We have those opportunities in the box. Nico, you can't blame him, but he should have scored that. Uh, Pellegrino had
Yeah.
more than that one chance where he did score. But it seemed like once he scored a goal, he forgot that he had to do anything else. You know, you have to keep on, stay on, keep working, and we could have won that game if Pellegrino put some of them away. That kills the other team's mindset. That makes them like, okay, you know, this game's too far gone. And even if it doesn't, this makes it much harder for them to come back and win. You know, if we win up 2-1, then that's a 2-2 game after this score, and that's a bigger mountain for them to climb. But we make it really easy for them because we don't put away our chances. We keep the games kind of low scoring, and we let them get back into it because our defense isn't good. But if our defense is lacking, then our offense needs to step up and be the ones who make the team who they are. And unfortunately, we do have a good offense, but they haven't been that you know that I guess impactful in my opinion.
Yep. It's a simple game sometimes. The team that makes the fewest mistakes wins, and that hasn't been the Earthquakes for a very long time this season. So it won't get any easier against Cincinnati, but at least there is a lot of other international soccer we can distract ourselves with, and it's a fun thing to talk about. So we look forward to talking about those tournaments, and we're looking forward to talking about the Quakes again very soon, and hopefully with better things to come. We'll see how it goes. But thank you again, Abram, for your time today. This is a lot of fun as this 5-1 loss can be. But, we'll look forward to the Quakes recovering from this self destruction. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for watching, and see you
Go
soon.
Quakes.
Go Quakes.